Okay. Luke chapter 17. Whoop, that's the next week's one. Hold on, it's still in Luke. We're going to be in chapter 6, verse 43 and 45. Luke chapter 6, verse 43 through 45. You know, the question that we need to ask of ourselves is, are we producing good or bad fruit? We're going to produce one or the other. And we need to be asking ourselves that question. You know, are we living our life in such a way that people see it? That people want to take a bite out of it? You know, you see a apple red and juicy. You want to bite out of it. You want to take it. You want to take it from the tree and take that apple and bite into it and be a part of it. Are we living a life like that? Are we living a life where people don't want anything that we got? That's what we need to be looking at. You know, in our life, we are what we would want to hang out with. Think about that for a second. Are we the person that we would want to hang out with, or we want our children to hang out with? Now that really puts it home. Are we living our life? I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, because I said so. That's not the way to live. Don't do what I do, but do what I tell you to do. You see, people don't hear very well. They observe. If you look at your children when they were growing up, little kids, how do they learn to do something? Did you tell them how to do it, or did you illustrate it for them? They grow up watching. They grow up learning by what you do. You can have all the books in the world you want to, but if they're not able to see it, they don't pick it up. And that's how the world is out there. So are we living the life of the good fruit? Or are we living the life of the bad fruit? Are we willing to compromise? Well, I don't like what the Bible says about that. This is what the world says about it. Let's compromise. Let's make people. We don't want to make anybody mad. We don't want to hurt feelings. Well, look at our world today. We are where we at today in our world because we compromise. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want to tell anybody they're doing a bad job. We don't want to tell someone they're failing. What ends up happening is that bad fruit gets out there. And what happens with bad fruit? It spoils the whole crop. Look at our world. Are we the good fruit? Are we hanging out there? Are we being the examples for everybody to see? Everybody walk by and they want to pick some of them. They want to be like it. But what are people more worried about today? Being excluded from the world. We don't want people mad at us. We don't want people talking about us. So we go along with what everybody does. People don't want to hear the truth. Have you ever noticed that? They don't want to hear the truth. If you're messing up, they don't want to tell you because they're scared you're going to get upset. You know what, James? If you got a shovel and you're out there and you're digging that hole we dug over here that day, you're digging in the weather we got right now, and I know that you're digging in the wrong spot, but I don't want to get you upset, so I just let you keep digging. Would you want me to do that? No. But you know what? That's what we do in the world today. We let people keep digging in the wrong spot because we are more concerned with going along with everybody else and making everybody happy. But James may have been happy digging over in that dirt. It may have been a lot easier digging. It may have been long. And you just, he was digging away. In about 10 or 15 minutes, he'd blow his head. He's just digging away. But I know over here in this hard-packed red clay is where he's supposed to be digging. But I'm afraid to tell him that because I don't want to make him mad. He might enjoy digging in that hole over there. But I know the truth. I know the truth. But I'm afraid to tell him that where he needs to be at. Understand, that hard-packed clay is where he needs to be. But I'm afraid to tell him that because he don't want to come over here and dig in that. He'd rather stay over there. Well, eventually, you're not going to be able to get out. You're going to keep digging. He's going to keep digging. He's going to keep digging. And then he's going to look up at me and say, why didn't you tell me? Why'd you let me get this far down and not tell me that I'm in the wrong spot? I'm doing the wrong thing. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. You see, we have a duty to do this. It says here, for a good tree does not bear bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. He can dig in that hole until he hits molten lava. And it's not going to bear good fruit. Because it's in the wrong place. It's the wrong thing. For every tree is known by its own fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they gather grapes from a bramble bush. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good, and an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. We want to hide the truth. We don't want to hurt people's feelings, and so we just give up. If you're in that situation as a Christian, you just give up. Why? Why go out there and tell people? They're not going to listen. They're going to get mad. They're not going to like me. They're not going to talk to me. They're not going to want to be my friend. Well, what type of friend am I if I know they're digging in the wrong spot and I tell them? What friend am I knowing that they're not a saved child of God and I tell them about what Jesus has done? You see, we sort of got this thing wrong. We think that if I go over and tell James, you need to stop digging here, you need to go over here and dig, this is where you need to be. And if James doesn't do it, I get upset with him. No. I'll just keep bringing him water. I've done what I'm supposed to do. I've told him. I can't save him. I can't pray for him and save him through my prayer. I can't drag him over there and beat him over the head and say, you're going to do this right here. Can't do that. But if I'm going to produce good fruit, I have to hang it out there for people to see and people to hear, and then they make the choice. Think about going in the grocery store. and you walk by the apples, which ones do you pick? The nice looking red and shiny ones? Or the ones that are off color and stuff like that? You pick the nice red shiny ones because you think they're the best apples, right? But it's your choice which ones you get. You choose them. They just have to be provided. And that's what we have to do. We cannot give up. We cannot say, I'm not fighting this battle anymore, because it says right here, for a good tree does not bear bad fruit. I'm putting the fruit out there. If you want to hear it, if you want to listen to it, that's on you. I'm not held accountable for that. You're not held accountable for that. What you're held accountable for is what fruit you're putting out there. That's what you're held accountable for. So to have good fruit, we have to remain strong in our faith. We have to be in prayer. And I harp on this a good bit, I know that. But you want to know something? That is one of the most essential parts of a Christian life, is a prayer life. Prayer is your food. You're sitting down at God's table in prayer. You're talking to God at the kitchen table. You're telling Him your aches. You're telling Him your pains, your desires, your heartaches. You're talking about your day. The Bible. I harp on reading the Bible. There's a reason why. That is your meal. That is your drink. That's what gives your spirit the energy, the fortitude to go out the next day and face a world that does not want to hear you, a world that does not want the fruit that you are offering to them. But by doing that, you don't give up. We're not of this world. We're just passing through this world. We're living in this world for a short time. We have a mission. We have a purpose that God has given us. And that's why we're here on earth. And as I said in my short this morning that I posted on the internet, once my purpose and mission is complete, guess what happens? I get to retire. I go home. This is the mission field that God has sent me to. This is the mission field that God has sent you to. We're not of the world. We're not part of the world, we're of the world. We've been pulled out of the world and placed back in it for a purpose. To provide examples, to tell people about Jesus. That's the good fruit that we produce. The fruit just sitting in a chair or on a pew is not the fruit God is talking about here. He's talking getting out there and working. Letting people see who you are. So how are we to know if we're producing good fruit or not? Are we known by our deeds? Are we known by what we do? Are we like everyone else? Are we doing what everyone else is doing? Are we going down the same road everyone else is going down? Or are we going in the opposite direction? You see, that's what God does. When we ask Jesus, He takes us out of the world and He turns us around. The world's going this way, He turns us around, and we're going this way. We're going opposite of where the world is going. We're not following along with the crowd. So that means we're not to be doing what everyone else is doing. We're not to let what everyone else is doing influence what we know what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be in opposition to what the world says is okay. Be doing it differently. Do we stand out in the crowd? Not because we're physically imposing, but because we're different. We are different from everybody else. People look around and they recognize that we're different. That doesn't mean that we walk around with sackcloth on and we can't dress nice. Can't wear blue jeans, you have to wear suits all the time and stuff like that. No, that doesn't know what it means. It means that we live differently than what the world says is okay to live as. You can be the poorest of the poor and still be different. You can be the richest of the richest and still be different. There's nothing wrong with being rich and there's nothing wrong with being poor. Being rich simply means God has provided you the resources to help His people. And being poor simply means God has blessed you with not having to have problems that rich people have. Because I've seen it happen too many times. Where when somebody gets money, money becomes their God. When I think about Richard, our friend, Hedrick, God blessed him, and he used the money God gave him to spread the gospel. Not just in Mississippi, but all over the world. When his mission was done, God brought him home. Our job, everyone sitting in here this morning has a mission, has a responsibility to be good fruit. Another way that we can tell whether or not we have good fruit is to who we turn to in the time of troubles. Do we go running to some man? Or do we turn to God? When we get bad news, do we just go to pieces and turn to man? Or do we go to God? It doesn't mean that we can't be hurt, that we can't cry, that we can't suffer. What it means is that we know who can give us the comfort and the strength to get through whatever it is. Who do we turn to? Do we seek God's guidance? Or do we go to the bookstore and get a self-help book? Have you ever thought about that for a moment? You're going to the self-help store to get a book from an author that one of two things has happened to him. Either it has never happened to him and he thinks he knows the answer to it, or it's happened to him and he thinks he knows the answer to it. Okay? The one who knows the answer is God. And He gives His advice for free. You ain't got to go buy a book. He gives it for free. A third way is, do we live what we preach? People watching us And we're saying, do this, do that, this is how you got to do. And then they look at us, how are we living? Are we living, don't do as I say, but don't do as I do, but do as I say? As Christians. Are we perfect? No way. But we are different from the rest of the world. Does our life reflect that? Can people look at us and see Jesus? And I don't mean to physically see him, but to see his essence, to see his teaching. You see, his teaching should be hanging off of us for others to pick. We should be a tree in the apple orchard. And you're walking down through there and say, oh, that apple right there looks so great. And you reach up and you take it. That should be the fruit hanging from us. Do we love like Jesus? Now, what does that mean? Are you willing to give your life for someone who hates you? That's the love of Jesus. He gave his life for those who hate him. Are we willing to do that? Do we serve Jesus? Do we work for him? That doesn't mean you got to be a preacher. That doesn't mean you got to be a Sunday school teacher. What that means, very simply, is, am I willing to go out there in the world, be his example, tell people about him, and be willing to lead others to Christ? That's what that means. Am I willing to change how I live? To give up things so others can see? See, as long as we hang in the world out there, it's like a curtain. Can't see through it. But when we take that curtain down, when we quit living like everyone else and get serious, people can see. People can see. So the question is, are we producing good fruit? We can only produce good fruit if God is dwelling in us. If we're out there working for God, not for us, but for God. If I'm out there doing it for myself, God ain't getting nothing out of it. I'm just doing it for myself. But if I'm out there doing it for God and only God, I'm out there seeking to serve only God, to do what he wants me to do, then I'm producing good fruit. I'm wanting to share what God has given me. The greatest riches, the greatest treasure that we have is what God has given us. And that's Jesus. And that's what we're called to share. It's Jesus. God gives to us abundantly. Why? so we can give Jesus to others. So we can take what we got. See, here it is. Even if we empty ourselves, the moment we hit empty, He fills us back up. He gives us Himself so that we can give to others. He gives us Himself to us so we can be blessings to others. We are to lead others to Christ. We are to reflect God. That doesn't mean we are God. That doesn't mean we have supernatural powers and things like that. We're simply to live as Jesus lived. Serving others. Being willing to die for others. And in some instances, giving the ultimate service for others. We are to be different. People look at Christians, those who are serving, strangely. Why? Because they cannot understand why someone would not go along with everybody else. Why we would be standing out there by ourselves. They can't understand that. Why don't they have the herd mentality and do what everybody else is doing? We are to do the work God has called us to do. Whether it's inconvenient or not. He's given you a job. He's given you a mission. And we're to complete it. And I here to promise you one thing. He walks with you every step of the way. When you get beaten bloody, He's there to pick you up and clean you up. When you feel like you're defeated, He's there to strengthen you. Why? Because we are His child. And we are different. And I call you to be different this week. Well,